Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. Welcome to Onsite Offshore, a dedicated podcast for professionals involved in offshoring project, where we chat with business owners, project managers, analysts, and software developers who have successfully supported their clients from India, and also connect with entrepreneurs who outsource the work to offshoring firms. I'm your host Suresh Ashok, founder of Matsya Infotech, with a passion for selling and supporting offshoring projects. I have a very special guest with me today, Mr. Vinay Advani from Cognizant. He's an IT professional with over 25 years of experience, specializes in AI, machine learning, and data analytics. I'm so excited for this episode. What our audience is going to learn from this conversation is how Vinay has successfully managed various IT projects from offshore. Welcome to our show, Vinay. Hi, Vinay. How are you?
Hey, hi, Suresh.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedule and joining our podcast today. I really appreciate the kind gesture. So let me dive straight to the topic. Do you remember your first offshore project? Do you recall your first client and the task you worked on?
Absolutely. So this is a slightly interesting story because I joined my previous company as a business analyst, and there was not really any need or requirement for me to travel on site at that point of time when I joined them. So happened that somebody dropped out and I had to travel on site. I still remember it was the 30th of April where I was asked to travel. This was way back in 2001, and there was a bit of a fire on that project. So even though May 1st was an international holiday in Singapore, I was there. In fact, I was doing a small project for Citibank at that point of time. So we were there in the office. That project was essentially a business intelligence solution based project with half the team being offshore. They were really required to work on the data portion of it, the ETL bit, and so on, while the smaller on-site team was looking at the front end reporting. And just like that, bang in the middle of not expecting it, I was looking at an offshore team and working on that offshore project with that team. Even though I was a business analyst and there was a project manager, we had a lot of interactions with the offshore team simply because we basically needed the whole back end to be ready before we could do anything with the front end, or at least it had to be ready faster than we could build the front end. So that was probably my first experience in working with a team. It may not be a classical offshore where if you take a US client type of offshoring project, this would be kind of, one team works during the day, the other team works when the first team is sleeping. It's kind of the night. This was Singapore and India. The difference is 2.5 hours, but it still made a huge difference to us to have an offshore team where we could push stuff onto. And, if we wound up, say, around the 6 or 7 o'clock mark, we knew that we had somebody working for another 2.5 hours because they were sitting out of India and doing it. And it made a huge difference to the eventual success of that project.
How did you feel working for interacting with Singapore clients? I mean, that's when you started your career. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like in 2001, or it was then?
I started a few years before that. So, in fact, just in around April 6th of this year, I completed 25 years. But this was my first international client. This was my first overseas opportunity to work as part of a software company. I had moved from the banking and fintech line into the software space in 2001. I had joined this company in about February, and by May I was on site. The feeling was amazing at that point of time for multiple reasons, but more so because when you suddenly take yourself out of that immediate picture, take a step back and look at it, you kind of understand the magnitude of work which needs to be done. And if you see the value of offshoring, your brain starts clicking. You start to understand that this is how I divide the work. This is what I need to do on site. This is where I can use offshore to really augment everything, both in terms of expertise, in terms of time savings, in terms of the fact that you can focus on sitting on site, talking to the client, showing them what work is being done, getting their feedback, while you have literally like an army behind you sitting offshore to kind of do your work and get things ready. So that's pretty much how I look at it. We are like the frontline soldiers, whereas the might of the army sits offshore and does
That's
your
a
work.
good analogy, Vinay. But prior to that, what was the difference you immediately figured out, like working for Indian market and then immediately switching to a Singapore market? I mean, in terms of the project as well as in terms of interaction with your client.
So one thing which happens is generally the scope increases. You do any work for an Indian client at that point of time. Things have changed now. Your scope would be a little bit more limited. You would probably be doing work for a smaller set of clients or end clients, maybe more Indian based. Whereas if you're doing work for a global client and they in turn are serving multiple countries, that makes a huge difference. Your scale, your vision, everything has to change at that point of time. And yeah, that's one of the key things I would talk about. The other one is there are different styles of working. I'm not here to decide which style is right, which style is wrong, but you get exposed to a different kind of working style, a different level of professionalism. And by all means, it doesn't mean that we're not professional or we don't do things, but it's just that, probably they were mildly ahead of the curve at that point of time. I think now Indians and the style and with the adoption of DevOps and MLOps or everything is standardized. We're all there. But at that time, it was very interesting to see how a project was planned out literally from one problem statement and it ballooned out into a multi-million-dollar project. And this is not just this one; there are multiple ones, which I have worked on, and this is how it's
Right. And your role was as a business analyst. I mean, can you explain the responsibilities of a business analyst in IT project, including the role within the organization and how they manage clients?
sure. So there are multiple things which I need to talk about, and the first nuance is which people don't get when you completely remove yourself out of the IT space and you talk about a business analyst. Traditionally, you were talking about somebody who works for a consulting company who would analyze how the company is been performing and based on numbers and other factors would give you inputs about how you can improve your business. So that's essentially what originally a business analyst did. Then with the advent of software companies and with the advent of kind of working, everybody realized that, hey, we need somebody to talk to the business. It can't be a technical person because, well, they're more used to expressing themselves in a more technical fashion, probably also including some jargon, and may not be able to communicate very effectively with the business user. Again, I'm not generalizing here, but this was the thought process at that point of time. So everybody, all the software companies looked for one business analyst, and the clean and simple definition was he was the bridge between the technical team and the client. So he was able to speak both languages and translate what the client was telling and pass that on to the technical. As time went by, you started hearing about techno business analysts. So techno business analysts were somebody who, apart from being a business analyst, had technical knowledge to write a few queries and do work. And more often than not, it was nothing but one of the technical guys who had that ability to understand the project, what the client was going for, and played that role. Now, this role evolved due to multiple reasons. One was, the client wanting everybody to contribute on the project. The business analyst was more required only during the requirement time, and then there was a kind of lull where he was there. It'll probably get clearer when I talk about specifically what responsibilities the business analyst had. The business analyst's main role, as I of course mentioned, was being the bridge. He had to actually he or she had to get the requirements from the clients. And if anybody has done root cause analysis and if they've looked back with how things went in a project, whether good or bad, more often than not, if you look at the fact that, okay, if there was a slippage or a leakage in the project and where things went wrong, more often than not, you would see it was because of incorrect requirement gathering.
Right.
So, business analyst's role was of paramount importance, had to understand what the requirements were, and not just understand it, he had to define it and document it. This is very important here because the client was required to sign off at the end on that document saying that, yes, I agree that this is what you're going to work on and this is what you're going to deliver. Now, in project management, this is hugely important because what happens is you're fixing the goal. You're fixing the goalpost and you're saying, guys, everybody has to run towards this goalpost. Now, if you're going to have requirements keep changing, it essentially means a moving goalpost, which is essentially really difficult to score a goal on. Okay. So this is where the business analyst role became very important. Now, in the traditional world, there was a bit of a gap after the requirements were done, dusted, and signed off because development team, especially then when they were not really working in agile mode, would take a little bit of time to complete their development. And the business analyst would then come back in and say, hey, now let me test what you've built because I know the requirements well. I'm the one who documented and defined them. Let me see if you've built it according to those specifications. And he would start working. So his role was gathering requirements, documenting them, interacting with the client and getting him or her to sign off, and then finally getting back into testing the development work before it gets released to the client.
And whenever the business analyst also contributes in helping the sales team win a contract, I'm assuming these things happen before the contract is signed, or you guys help the sales team or the pre-sales team like in requirement gathering and then taking it to the other team, or it only starts like when you sign a contract, so, like the business analyst role gets in.
So let me put it this way: a business analyst will eventually become a pre-sales person in one way or the other. So one is if you are looking at a business analyst who has spent some time working with the client, he's in the best position to identify requirements at that stage and to kind of tell the client that, hey, from my experience, this is what we can do. So kind of gets into doing a pre-sales role or mining the account. But if you look at a
go ahead. No, so the pre-sales work would be more or less on a high-level requirement understanding that you give some level of confidence to the client or potential prospect. Yes, we can do that. And once both the party agrees, then you start working on the documentation part, a deep dive into the requirement.
So Suresh, what happens typically is that, and this is probably true 25 years ago, and it's true even today. You can go and tell the client, I have this great solution, or I have this great team, and we can build something for you. But more often than not, the question will come back and say, that's great to know, but have you done it before? I mean, you're talking about all this theoretically. Do you have any experience? And that's where the business analyst plays a very important role because he's going to come and talk about his experience. He's going to talk about the fact that there were issues in the project, which is there in every single project, of course, and how he overcame them, how he or she is going to learn from whatever happened in the past and bring that learning into the new project. And that's what clients are looking for. Right? They come to you because they say, hey, you are an expert and there will be issues and you also know how to deal with those issues. That's probably where he comes into the picture.
Well, that sums up well. And what, according to you, are the core competency of a business analyst?
So one thing I would say immediately, and this might sound very simple, but it's a bit philosophical also. He or she should have the ability to listen. This is most important, right? You need to listen to what the client is telling you, understand the requirements. You may want to give your feedback, but your first job is to listen and understand. Likewise, you need to listen and understand what your technical team is telling you in terms of what's possible, what's not possible, and so on. So listening, number one. Number two, good communication skill. You need to be able to capture what the client is saying, document it. It will be really useful if you are able to draw process flow diagrams using whatever tools are available, because that kind of just makes everything really clear when it's put down in some kind of a visualization. So those skills are important. We talk about communication also. And technically, you may or may not have some skills. You may be able to write queries in simple, SQL or something if you want to query the database and understand what numbers are being created. But if you ask me, it's still a nice to have, even if you don't really possess that skill, especially today, where a lot of the data is slowly being moved into a manner in which even a non-technical user can use a kind of GUI to query the database. You don't really need to have those technical skills. So the ability to listen, the ability to communicate, the ability to document, and finally, if you're the one taking down the requirements, you should be able to test it. I mean, there's nobody else who can test it as well as you can because you exactly know how that solution is supposed to work. This is probably what I would say is what the business analyst should possess as
quality. So the first thing is listening. It's a must, and good communicator. And if I may say, like analytic mind, the third one.
Absolutely. So I'll take the Apple story. So I'm just paraphrasing here. Many people say that, the way Steve Jobs always worked was he said, let me give the consumer what he's asking for, and then also what he needs but doesn't know it, right? So nobody thought at that point of time that I'll need a touchscreen phone the way the iPhone came out at that stage. So it's very similar. The client may tell you X, Y, Z. You must be able to analyze the entire set of requirements and come back and tell the client, hey, I'm adding this extra feature, or this feature may not be required or may not be really suitable for you. So that kind of quick analysis, kind of being able to think of the entire solution in your head and visualize it, and then go back and determine what features are necessary and not. And of course, the end decision is the client's, but being able to support the client by giving this kind of valuable feedback is really important.
And when I missed to ask another question, when you were discussing about managing IT project with your client, what are the different phases of a project typically you or a business analyst participate in? You mentioned about pre-sales and requirement gathering. And while during the development stage, do you think a business analyst plays any particular role, or while delivery, post-implementation, if I may say?
Yes, in today's world, especially Suresh, everything is moved to agile. You have development cycles which have been shortened. You have drops happening sometimes every month. So literally, the business analyst is part of the whole phase where the agile leader releases what should be picked up from the backlog, should go into development. Business analyst has to work alongside the developers to ensure that everything is being done correctly, because it's such a short cycle. So helping the developers, answering questions on a daily basis. And that's one of the things what offshoring is all about, where the client gives you the work and in theory he forgets about it and says, okay, now you complete it and come back to me. So business analyst plays or dons the hat of the subject matter expert, answers questions from the developers, tests what's going out and releases based on every drop or every cycle or sprint. And that might be quite frequent. It might be once in 2 weeks, once in a month. So he's pretty much going to have his hands full during that point.
I mean, on a lighter note, which team do you find easier to interact, while interacting with the offshore team, whether the sales team, the technical team or the delivery team?
So this is a really funny question, because I have literally done all of that. I have done sales, hardcore frontline sales. I've looked after pre-sales. I've been a business analyst.
Yeah, but let me ask you, who do you enjoy interacting the most? You find okay, fine, this is I can easily explain to them or interact to them, and I know things will be get done. I can get things done.
I think my joy has always been in interacting with the technical team, and I'll tell you why. As a business analyst, somebody's coming to you and saying, this is my problem statement. And it could even be a simple one-line problem statement. You are basically fleshing it out into a whole full-fledged problem, what the solution is, and to address that solution, what is required by the development team. And the development team literally builds it, and you get to see what started out with a single line problem statement come to life on screen. Literally, there can be no bigger high. And especially if everything works out well. Now, when it comes to the sales team, you do have people sometimes who are not very well versed technically, and they tend to kind of want the solution or the system or the people to sometimes do things which may not be very feasible. And then you spend a lot of time talking about what could be the solutions, or it may be that the sales team has committed something to the client which may not be very feasible, and getting into those conversations are never easy, both with the client and with the sales team, because it's already committed and you have to go back and tell the development team, crunch everything and complete it. What should have taken 4 weeks, I want it done in 2 weeks. Those conversations are never easy. So I think I would literally be more than happy to just talk to the development teams and bring ideas.
Right. And any specific tools as a business analyst you use on a daily basis? I mean, any top 3 or top 5 where you feel this is mandatory for me, without this, I can't carry out my work.
So there are a number of tools which are out there in the market today, but I'm going to say something which I know will resonate with a lot of people out there, even when they hear this. The first thing you need to know is Excel. Literally, if you do not know Excel, you're fish out of water. The amount of stuff you can do with Excel, the amount of automation you can bring about even just taking notes, tagging those notes, running filters, doing those smart things is very, very difficult. Or doing your testing by pivoting data and quickly mocking up reports, impossible unless you kind of know how to use Excel and know how to use it well. So that's something I would want to talk about. Look, there are a number of tools out there, and each one of them is coming up with what they think is the best way to capture requirements, so that it translates into something very usable. But I really, I probably from that generation we didn't use too much of it. I have used a few tools. I've used Rational at one point of time. I have used SWOT. I have used a couple of other tools, I would say. Certainly, at that point of time, Visio was very useful for me to kind of come up with really neat visualizations. I think if you just are good with all of these, you would probably be good enough. I've used strange tools. I've used tools like Doors, which is interesting because once you capture all the requirements, it kind of builds the whole thing automatically into a process diagram. But there's so much of stuff out there today, especially now with the advent of generative AI, that I would say still stick to it. Learn Excel first and do everything.
Okay, so you're
Excel, PowerPoint, Word, the whole Office suite, and then you can really look at other.
So the other tool you mentioned about Rational, right? I mean, is that for creating diagram or for gathering requirement?
It's for capturing requirements. Rational actually helps you to capture requirements. Way in which you will be able to retrieve items and kind of link them together, add things like dependencies which are there. So all of this is something which something like this would help you.
Right. Thank you so much, Vinay. So I made a note of it as well. Rationals and Doors. Okay. Another office suite, complete office suite. And Vinay, you're working with Cognizant for the last 10 years now? Close to?
Not yet 10 years, about 8 years.
And what's your current role in roles and responsibility in Cognizant? I mean, I've gone through your LinkedIn profile. It said you're someone who established AI and machine learning practice within the organization. I mean, that's something which you started in Cognizant.
So, of course, I didn't start it specifically. I mean, that's been around for a while, but there was a time where a data and analytics division was being created within Cognizant, and I was the one who was the first recruit for leading the AI/ML practice within that. Essentially, we kind of work on any internal AI/ML requirement. That's what my team does, and we're responsible for. We also evaluated a cloud platform and we put it into production with all the necessary security features in place. We kind of run POCs all the time to make sure we're ahead of the curve. And our whole aim is to bring about the benefits of AI and ML to all our internal corporate functions. So that's pretty much what me and the team does. This is not something which I've done always in Cognizant. This is about 3.5 years old, this role. And yeah, it's a really exciting role given where the world is with AI and ML.
So now you're in a different position. I mean, now you take care of different aspects of business.
Yeah, I moved away from both business analysis, which is the hardcore piece of it, or project management, or even sales. I was doing that for my previous company where I was handling business development and looking after the P&L for a region. I moved out of all of that now, and I'm basically more looking at helping to set up and establish a center of excellence within Cognizant for our internal usage.
Right. So, okay, fine. And when just to add another question to the business analyst role, which I think I missed out. For someone who's starting out in the IT industry and looking to become a business analyst, what guidance or suggestion would you offer? And to add to a point, it just came to my mind today that for someone who's not an engineer, or because I interact with lots of people, they say I'm not an engineer, and how can I join an IT industry? It's because traditionally that's the way it is. And obviously there are other areas of work like sales or marketing, where you don't have to be an engineer, still you can join the IT industry. What's for business analysts?
If you were to look at business analysts and you want to talk to somebody who's interested in this field or wants to get into this field, you will essentially have to have some kind of technical understanding if you really want to get into this space. So by that I don't mean completely technical and the ability to code or anything of that sort. Whatever you know will be a plus, but a technical bent of mind to be able to understand what is being spoken about by that team. So if the technical team was to tell you, hey, we can't do this because of XYZ reasons, you can't just go and repeat that back to the client. You need to understand what it is before you talk about it. So that's one thing. So some basic technical understanding. Then, as I mentioned, the ability to communicate both orally and written. And in written, then it kind of breaks down to being able to use Word, Excel, and PPTs to capture information. The third one is if you do have some particular expertise in one particular space, that would probably help you to become an SME in that space, right? So if you have some knowledge of banking, let's say you worked for a year, then you went back and did your MBA, and then you came back, you could possibly look at being a business analyst within a large company, which specifically where you could be working only for banking clients, because you know what banking is all about. You understand the terminology, and each industry is different. And so that will certainly help if you get into an area where you already have some expertise or
When I
something.
can a fresher,
Beyond that,
sorry to interrupt, can a fresher become a business analyst, for example, just out of college? And do you think any company would offer him that role as a business analyst, or he needs to be mentored for a period of 2 to 3 years?
there would be some mentoring required, Suresh. I don't think anybody can jump
Right.
right in and immediately become a business analyst. So, what you would call an associate or a junior business analyst is what you would be, and you would need to spend some time with somebody else who's done it before to understand processes, to get it right, to understand what to capture, what are the right questions to ask, how do you deal with clients. Little bit of a sales thing has to come into you because you're talking to the client. So it's entirely possible, but if you look at all the bigger firms and the companies, they do pick up freshers, but you will need to spend some time with some of your
Right.
senior business analysts before you actually get into a role where you can independently
Can
contribute.
you recommend some courses or books for the audience who's listening, like who want to switch to the career or start their career as a business analyst? Anything to start with, or go through some documentation or book or course available in the public domain.
Yeah, so there are two or three different things. One is if you are really interested in getting professionally certified, you do have IIBA, or the International Institute of Business Analysis. It's a professional association. They have a facility for you to go and study and then become certified one in their space. This has been around for I think, about 20 years now, but it's really picked up steam in the last few years. I can see even the Indian chapter really growing and becoming big. And if you ask me to draw a parallel, this would be like the complete equivalent of a person completely doing, let's say, a project management course, a PMP, becoming a certified project manager. You can become a certified business analyst. So this is something which is really picking up and really, really useful. So it's iiba.org for those who are interested. The only thing is you would necessarily have to have some experience to really get the gist of the course. So maybe this makes sense if you're kind of getting into it maybe a year or two down the line after doing this course. We actually really kind of understand this even better if you're doing this. But it's a great course, and I would certainly recommend it to people who are really serious about building their career in this space. Uh, and the time is right. The number of members is growing heavily, and if you get into it now, you're certain to really reap the benefits as you move.
Yes.
So that's one thing. There are a number of courses on Coursera, on Udemy. If you just go and click on business analyst, you would get tons of these courses. So pick whatever helps you to do it. But essentially, you can, within business analysis also, you can look at, I just want to analyze stuff. I want to be a little bit more involved with the data. Communication, that's a skill which is there. Courses which are there out there for it. And there are a number of courses which you can do. So there is an entry certificate in business analysis offered by IIBA, And if you were to ask me, pick one course and tell me, what anybody should do, I would say that's the one to do. It gives you a lot of credibility out there in the space. It gives you a lot of theoretical knowledge to get into it. And that's something people should certainly look at.
So it's iiba.org. Just visited the website. It's International Institute of Business Analysts, right? It's the one.
Yeah, you probably can put
Yeah,
a link. Yeah.
I'll share the link after the,
link
after the session.
section.
Thank you so much, Vinay. And Vinay, you've been involved in offshoring business for the last 24 years. I mean, any specific way, like, you manage your on-site and offshore team?
I must correct you. I'm not really doing offshoring anymore. I've done it a lot in the past. A great amount of expertise in that space, given that, I did it at least for 15 out of these 24 years. Um, so what, if you were to ask me, how do you manage an offshore team when you're sitting on site? So let me put it that way, right? There's a lot of nearshoring going on. There's a lot of offshoring entirely going on over the years. And typically you'd see many companies falling into this hybrid model where you have two or three key resources on site or a slightly larger team, and then you have a completely backed up offshore team. And I think those days have gone where people completely gave large projects to offshore without having an on-site presence. So if you have one or two people there, then uh, larger projects are managed that way. But if it comes to small ones, then yes, you can just, as long as you get the requirements completely and clearly documented, the entire piece can be done from offshore. Now, when it comes to managing the offshore team, I think, let me try and give you some of the things which are not what you probably usually hear. So one is, you need to strike a good rapport with the offshore team, and you need to understand, what or how they would like to function, both in terms of working style and in terms of time, right? Typically, when you are on site, you tend to just understand what the client wants and then tell the offshore team, okay, I'll get this done for me by tomorrow or day after or whatever. And they might be a little unrealistic at times, what you ask of them. So you would necessarily need to take into account that just because you're on site and they're offshore, it just doesn't mean that things are going to magically happen. So be mindful of your team who's working offshore. They are your foundation, and you need to treat them very well. So that's primarily one. The other one is, and it's like a recurring theme throughout this conversation, you would definitely need to be very clear about the requirements, whether it's in any shape or form. Preferably, it has to be documented clearly. And this is because the whole concept of offshoring is that they're working in a completely different zone. And you or anybody else may not be available to answer questions as the development team is doing their work. And that's where, clear cut requirements will help them to really be effective. So again, paramount importance for you to give them very, very clear requirements. And the third one would be to have that ability to either structure the project in such a way that either you're having drops quite often, or even if it's a longish kind of sprint which you're doing, you have the ability to keep monitoring or checking what work is going on, not for the purposes of monitoring, but because you don't want somebody to go down the wrong path inadvertently and then find that out 1 month later and say, oh, damn, whatever we did for the last month has to be redone, right? You don't want that to happen. So you keep checking as often as possible so that you can do mid-course corrections wherever needed. So I think if you were to keep it simple, this is it. You don't have to do anything much more than this to work with an offshore team and work with them successfully.
And do you think the offshore team gets enough credit? I mean, one of the reasons I started this podcast is because I still keep hearing, like, offshore or cheap resources, less quality of work. But when I see the volume of work, like, when we do it, or, some of my contemporaries, my friends involved in, there's a huge volume of work, like a huge development projects they're involved in. But I felt that they don't get enough credit. What's your thoughts on it?
I would absolutely 100,000% agree with you. I've literally been on that side of the fence. I've been part of offshore teams, and especially when you're younger, sometimes it's a little galling to see all the credit going to the on-site guys, because all some of the main people, because they were the face of the project, especially in front of the client. Right, client may not even know your name, given that you're somebody working offshore. I will add that a lot of clients have understood this, and probably for the last 5-10 years, you're seeing a lot of times where the client makes the effort to come down to wherever the offshore team is sitting and meet all of them and appreciate them for the work they're doing. So that's something which has been happening, and I think all the clients have recognized that. I think the internal recognition is what is kind of, I wouldn't say missing completely, but something which needs to be improved. Our own internal teams need to acknowledge the massive amount of heavy lifting that the offshore team does on the back end. And not just that, all of those last minute changes, those last minute pulls and pushes, and dealing with contingencies like people going on leave suddenly or people resigning and moving away, and quickly bringing in somebody, backfilling, and still ensuring that the work is done on time. I mean, you've got to take your hats off to any of the offshore teams, which typically almost like magicians keep pulling rabbits out of the hat all the time.
I mean, what is the biggest volume of project you have participated in terms of revenue as well in terms of duration of the project?
Uh, Project which spanned across 1 year and was in the region of, I think the total cost of the project ran into close to $10 million or so, everything included, all costs, not just us, but all the other ancillary teams and all the requirements of equipment and environment and so on. It would probably be slightly lower today if you were to do something like this because of cloud which has come in. I'm talking about something in a pre-cloud era. So also probably the fact that project sizes have come down to some extent, uh, because people have started breaking it up into smaller projects, and you've got the cloud which has taken some pressure off the costing.
Okay, and this was for Citibank, right? I mean, Citibank, or where did this happen?
Yeah, just one of those clients in
Yeah,
the past.
okay.
So we'll just keep it as one of the.
I mean, can you walk us through every steps of a project? From since you've been working in the industry for such a long period of time, I'm sure you would be aware of it. From securing an RFP or a sales guy closes a deal. What are the each steps involved? Till the time the delivery happens.
So Suresh, this is something which is to a large extent documented. I mean, there are oodles of stuff out
The
there.
reason I'm
About
asking is every company has its own way of doing it. For example, Cognizant is a huge company. I'm sure they would have enough team members or different team for each stages of the project. But your past experience working in Saxoft or prior to that, they may not have that kind of bandwidth to have so many resources in a project.
So let me answer you in a more generic way. This is nothing to do with Cognizant or Saxoft, but probably the reality on the ground when it comes to companies. So as you said, you've got, if you really want to start at the very beginning, you're talking about business development people or sales guys on the ground meeting clients and ensuring that we are invited for RFPs. And I'm talking about a scenario where you really don't even have a relationship with that bank, or it's something which is kind of new. I'm sorry, I said bank, but I meant any organization or industry. You kind of start over there. Of course, the situation slightly changes if you're already part of that company's ecosystem and you're doing work for them, because then it's more of a, can I do this also, instead of saying, can we work with you in the first place? So that's probably where it comes out. And then, as you mentioned, after that, the first thing you would probably have to do is get invited if there's a largish project to be a part of the RFP or RFI, where the company sends out a bunch of questions, and they use it as a tool to assess your company's capabilities based on your responses. And it also becomes some way in which they basically talk to multiple companies and then pick the best fit for them. And this is also kind of like a requirement from that side, where you don't give a project to a single company without ensuring that you have checked with the competitors, if I was to put it in a slightly simpler manner. So that will probably come to that stage. And then this is a very interesting stage where you have multiple teams coming together to answer the RFP, because the RFP will typically cover every single area. It will cover the back end, front end, middleware, security policies when it comes to offshoring, and so many of these other pieces. So it's like a mini project by itself where somebody holds the reins, connects to all the teams. It's like suddenly sending out tentacles to each team and saying, all of you give me the answers, collating all of that and putting it back to the client. Typically, you will have some kind of an RFP defense where you go in and explain what you've written if you are one of the shortlisted teams. So, by this stage, you're talking about the involvement of different teams, and whether it's a small or big company, sometimes you'll have multiple roles being played by one person. In which case, it's just that they are going to be picking up more than one section to answer the RFP. And if it's a larger company, then you may have different divisions for each section specifically, and they would then provide their expertise via the answers.
Mhm.
Now, if you do win the project and you move on from there, then it follows a typical STLC, which is kind of available. It's just that today you have some new things coming in. One, of course, Agile, which has come up and grown so much more in the last probably 5-10 years, to the point that it has almost become like you very rarely do a non-agile project today. Everything is moved to that in that stage. What's also come about is machine learning and AI ML and analytical projects, which have always been around but have gained a lot of experience and movement, and a lot of attention has gone towards it with the AI and ML field, making such jumps forward, in every few months, and so that has a little bit of a specialized expertise in that. But to a large extent, this is what it is. You would, once you secure the project, you have the STLC, you basically follow that and you deliver to the client. And then if you're going to be maintaining it for the client in whatever shape or form you're doing it, it would run across months or years. You would do that also.
And
So that's pretty much what happens.
thanks, Vinay. And how do you assemble a team after that? Like, assuming that you won a contract and you have to start the project in a month or two, or I don't think it will take 2 months, but at least you will give a window of 3 to 4 weeks. How do you assemble a team, and what portion of the work is done in on-site and offshore?
So that depends again. Assembling the team will completely depend on. Literally, it's going to be an assessment of a few people saying that for this piece of work, I need, let's say, 10 people to do it, out of which I want one techno business analyst, I want three ETL developers, I want one, two DB guys, I want three front end guys, I need one tester. So you kind of decide what it is. Now, who decides that? Well, one of the biggest decision makers in all this is essentially past experience, right? So if you've done projects which are similar to this or half the size or double the size, you have some kind of guidance towards saying that in that project I used 10 people and it was half the size of this project. So here I'll need, 20 people to do it. Or 20 might come down to 18 or 17. And that is where the expertise comes in of the team or the project manager in making that decision. Typically, today in largish companies, I think most of these decisions are peer reviewed. So you have a kind of governance team which double confirms what requirements have been given out, basically to say that, yeah, okay, this makes sense, or you've not slipped or missed anything or whatever at this stage. Well, that's typically what happens. In terms of work, as I said, it's going to vary. But at any given point of time, if a company is interested in offshoring, I would say fairly easily you could see anything between um, 60 to 70% of the work, maybe as high as even 75% of the work moving offshore, completely being done offshore. The rest of the work, maybe you have somebody on site, or maybe there are sessions where you need to involve the on site POC kind of in a regular, continuous fashion at that point of time. This 60 to 70%, what I'm talking about is where, it's just a development team doing their work without having the need to kind of talk to the client side, unless or until it is just to provide a status update or something of that sort.
And there will be one or two people interacting with the client on a regular basis. Not everybody, that won't be possible.
Yeah, so that is kind of the whole thing comes from having a a chain of communication, just like a chain of command, right? So just to keep things simple and to also keep things streamlined, you would not have everybody talking to the client. You typically want to document questions you're asking the client and the answers they're giving you, which is just good practices which you should be following. And you typically want to route all your questions from one client who then becomes the face of it. I'm sorry, one resource at your end who becomes the face of it, or the POC for the client. The client also finds it a lot easier to deal with one singular person than answering questions to any and everybody. So that kind of makes sense, and many times that's one of the roles the business analyst
Right,
plays.
fantastic. And do you remember any project like where you didn't meet the client expectation, fell short of the project? Because I'm sure you have worked on many successful projects over the last 25 years. Anything that comes to your mind which was could be done better?
Yeah, multiple projects, Suresh. Multiple ones. I wouldn't say that every single project has been resounding success with the client being extremely thrilled. There have been cases where they have, projects have not gone down very well. But let me tell you this: the worst one is where you have delivered something which is working fine technically, but is not meeting the requirement from a functional perspective. Which is why it's so important for the business analyst to understand what this solution is actually supposed to do. At the end of the day, business decides what technology should do and not the other way around. You can't just build some beautiful functionality which is technically really superior but of no use to the business or actually hampers the way they do it. And that has happened many times where you leave out something or some key feature which kind of makes it difficult to use. There will always be issues of slippage, delays, leakage, last minute requests from the client coming in to make changes. Some module which you tested but it's failing when it goes into production. And there are tons of these issues coming in. Everything has to be taken with a pinch of salt. Everything has to be um, looked at unemotionally. Everything needs to be assessed about what to do to solve the problem rather than at that point of time trying to figure out who made the mistake. You can do a post-mortem and you can do it just to understand what went wrong, not to point out as an individual, because if something is going wrong, uh, it has to be looked at from a team perspective and not a particular individual, of course. So these things are going to happen, and the best way is to just figure out how to solve it in the fastest way possible rather than trying to dwell on it.
Right. So there are numerous projects which didn't go well, right?
They will happen. They will happen, and I think the important part, like they say, is how you recover from that moment rather than dwelling upon it. So something goes wrong, there's a delay. I mean, if you're able to understand quickly and do a quick course correction, clients will be happy with that too. I think somewhere at the back of the heads, even they know that everything is not going to be perfect at all points.
So, and Vinay, what recommendation or suggestion would you offer to international clients who are interested in partnering with outsourcing firms, for the IT initiatives?
Well, pick your vendor carefully. Look at people who've done, uh, good work in the space. There's no particular metric to be used. There's no one size fits all. You may have smaller pieces of work, which typically you would have mid-sized companies being very proficient at doing because some of them are focused enough in what they do. If you have some work around one very specific area or specific technology or tool, you're better off working with a niche company which specializes in that area because you're going to get the best of the SMEs doing it when you do it with them. We typically look at companies which are flexible enough to be able to manage your requirements, may not always be straightforward. But yeah, just look for good companies which have, which are trustworthy, which have done work, which have delivered, and more importantly, understand how offshoring works and they need to how they need to deliver in terms. This is probably what is important.
Well, more or less, they should look that as an investment for the future. Like, at least they need to invest 3 to 4 months or 6 months. 6 months would be too long. At least 2 to 3 months to interact with the team and understand the culture, before they decide, like, whether they want to stick to working with an Indian company or not. Does it make sense, Vinay? Like,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, yes, you would need some time if they've started off outsourcing for the first time or offshoring for the first time. It's going to be a new change. It's something new, and as human beings, none of us take to change very well. So you need to give it that time. You need to figure out a balance between how things are going to work, and this is literally going to vary with every single team, every single client, and every single project. Nothing is going to be the same. So once you get that comfort factor of how to work with them, how do you interact with them, how do you put forward your queries, and how do you make sure that the biggest benefit of offshoring is like when one set of people are indisposed or sleeping, the other set is busy working, and you literally don't waste any time because you come back and you have things to attend to and check at and look at and give feedback, and again you continue from there, right? So it is important to look at it in that perspective in terms of interaction. It's very important, and it's equally important as you put it to allow things to settle down. Give it that time, give it that few months before you take any knee-jerk reaction, and be a little patient with the offshore team, because once they win your confidence over and once you get to trust them, then you would probably really reap the benefits. So that initial teething trouble will be nothing compared to the benefits you will get at a later.
and when Indian companies are doing that extra work, like, we work, resources are working overlapping US time zone or Australian time zone. They started doing that now, just to give that extra comfort to the international audience.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you literally have like two teams working for you. You have one full-fledged team who's working, and then an equal size or smaller size team working even in your time zone. So if you want to ask any question at any point of time, somebody is available, or at least available for part of your day. And this is very common now. I think most Indian companies are offering this, big and small. And I think it's a good step to gain confidence even more. Offshoring has taken quite a lot of a beating, Suresh, in the last few years, where people have moved away from it. They've said that the cost arbitrage doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't make sense really. They're not going to save that much of money if you move offshore. You want to have your people close by to you so that you can monitor them very closely, or you want to nearshore it even if you're bringing people from outside. And all of these things exist, but offshoring is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. It will never go anywhere. And you do have a large talent pool at offshore, which you'll never be able to get in most of the on-site geographies. And that's something people will recognize and realize.
And adding another question to that, what about the data security, like, which people often talk about? I mean, out of the thousands of projects or lakhs of projects, like, which has been completed by the offshore team, but one or two organization, this kind of news comes out, like, data breach happened. What's your take on it, Vinay? I mean, how do you think, like, we should tackle this?
Easily and completely avoidable. You have enough tools in the market. You can ring fence the areas and the data to which people have access to. You can encrypt PII before sharing it with the teams. This just this has literally become one of the easiest things to do today, and this, in my opinion, is nothing which should stop a company from considering offshoring, because this is something which can be addressed so easily today. My point of view is just understand how much you can do in terms of securing your data. Be a little data literate, and then you'll realize that it doesn't really matter who you're working with and where. Once you have those facilities in space, you can easily get work done from anywhere in the world.
Right. And Vinay, what websites or portals do you frequently browse or follow to stay updated on the latest technology news?
So there's nothing in particular. I typically use good old Google News. I keep going to their business sections. I've set up a lot of keywords. Today, I read a lot more on the analytics space because that's where I am in, and there are a number of Indian and international uh, forums where you can get really great information. Analytics Vidya is one of them in this space. Apart from that, there's an enormous amount of information which is out there on LinkedIn, and I think this is something people don't realize. It is not just a networking space, but a place where you can actually learn. I think you have even facilities of asking people to be your mentors, and there are a bunch of people who are willing to do so. They just want to give back. They're happy to guide you or talk to you. So there's a lot you can do. Um, I wouldn't say there's one specific area to keep yourself going, but you know, pretty much anything you can learn from anything or anybody. So or anywhere for that matter. So that's what I would just suggest. Keep your eyes and ears open. The important thing is figure out what works for you and what's kind of easy for you to access that information. So if you get time and you're able to spend some time browsing on your phone, then look at some site which is there where you can read information from there or whatever. And it's just going to depend from person to person. But really, really important, keep in touch with what's going on in the technology world today, not just in your area, because the world has changed so rapidly and continues to do so with the advent of so many new things coming out. Like you will, you'll be lost if you do not know what's going on, and that's really important for you to keep yourself updated.
Right. And Vinay, so if I have to summarize it, I would say LinkedIn and Google Alerts, the top two, which you use on a regular basis, and that's the best one,
the best
best
ways
one.
to go.
And the IT industry can be quite demanding. We've seen people, getting stressed out. How important is to have a healthy work-life balance? How do you spend your weekends, and do you take frequent breaks from work to recharge yourself?
Yeah, so multiple things, Suresh. Each person will work it out for themselves. But I'll start off with saying that very unfortunately, I don't remember his name. One of the eminent Indian management gurus said that the first responsibility of a manager is to keep himself healthy, because only a healthy manager can manage a team. You can't be somebody who's frequently unwell or taking time off, because then your team is left without a leader. So your first and foremost job is to keep yourself healthy. Now, there are a lot of stressors on the job which could lead you to de-stressing in a wrong manner. It could be just drinking too much of coffee, or having the need to go and smoke or something like that. And that's something you may want to just be very mindful of, because at a point of time, these habits will literally start harming you more than helping you in any way at all. Right? And that's the nature of these habits also. So be very careful about those ways and develop other ways of de-stressing. Sitting, as they say, is really bad. So literally keep an alarm, get up every half an hour, walk around. Whenever you can take a call and you have some kind of a cool Bluetooth device, walk around and take that call. In fact, Suresh, I'm walking around right now just to, the blood flow going. And we've been having this conversation for a while, and I've been sitting down for some time now. So that's equally important. Keep your eyes healthy. You're looking at either your mobile or your laptop screen, and probably even for leisure and entertainment, you're looking at another TV screen or another mobile or an iPad or a tablet or something of that sort. So keep your eyes healthy, and there are multiple things you can do for that. I do indulge once in a while in Trataka, which is a something which has come in from yoga, where you're staring at a candle for some time. It really helps to help your eyes and rejuvenate them. Uh, Try and get in your 8 hours of sleep. Whether this is applicable for any and everybody, including for people who are trying to lose weight or do something like that. Uh, when I was much younger, probably about 30 or 30 odd years ago, say, hey, you're sleeping too much. That's what some of the grandparents or the elder people used to say. And you got to get up early and get out there and run. And today you realize with all the advancements of science that none of that is true. The best favor you can do to your body is to get 8 hours of good sleep. Literally, that's going to help you in every which way possible. So keep all of that in mind. And if you can do something small, try and block that 1 hour or so for exercise. It could even be walking, running, whatever you want, morning, evening. Pick a slot, do it, but keep that area sacred. Don't allow work to come into that area. Let that time slot be very sacred, and you consistently got to do it. So it could even mean 6 days a week, but do it with that consistency, and the results you'll see are phenomenally good. And there's yoga. That's a great thing which you can do because you don't need too much of space. You don't need to run around. You can be in one space. It's important for you to stretch your joints, stretch your muscles, and keep yourself supple. And yoga is just amazing for that. The kind of benefits you can get out of that is phenomenal. And there are a lot of people who have integrated a little bit of yoga sitting on the chair. So they call it like desk exercise or chair yoga, because you may not be able to get up and walk around at all points of time, but you can sit in the chair and spend 2 minutes stretching and keeping yourself refreshed so that you can continue doing what you have to do over 8 or 10 hours. So, any and all of these are great practices for any manager to follow.
You went through major transformation as well, from the time I met you first. And when I look at you now, you have lost lots of weight. And how difficult it is, how consistent you have to, do certain activities time and again, to reach this level of fitness, which you're right now.
So you have to get a plan, and then it's sticking to it at least 95% of the time, Suresh. You are going to have that one odd thing where you can't really manage, and you are going to slip here and there once in a while, but sticking to it 95% or 90% of the time will let you see results. I'll break it down very simply for you. If you want to lose weight, you've got to take care of your diet and your sleep. To put things in perspective, you can run for an hour and probably burn about 500-600 calories, and you can eat 2 samosas, and that's equal to 600 calories. Okay. So pretty much, you got to take care of your diet first. And a lot of myths have been busted over the years. Diet doesn't mean going hungry. Diet just means eating the right kind of food and keeping your stomach full. Right? So that's important. And sleeping well. This is really, really important for losing weight. And you would do some light exercise. It's not that, you just want to cut down or eat the right kind of food and lose weight. Even walking, one of the most underrated activities in the world, can help. Walking, yoga, any of that. And if you're overweight, you may not be able to run immediately, but yeah, all of these will help. So that's one thing in terms of when it comes to losing weight, and goes without saying, keep away from vices as much as possible. And there's an important point around that, and I'll come back to that shortly. So losing weight, take care of your diet, sleep well. Stretching is very important, and that keeps your muscles in place, keeps your joints mobile. And typically when you get older, you suddenly start feeling aches and pains, and that's literally because you have not stretched your muscle and joints enough, that they're kind of not in shape. So you want to keep yourself pain free. This is what you would do. And the last one, it's important, but again, may not be easy for everybody, is to do some kind of strength training that builds strength for you. And that is basically like you banking this away for your older years, where metabolism slows you down and you may not be able to build up strength, and then you just withdraw from the bank you've built up over the years. So those are the three key things you would do. Coming back to the point I mentioned earlier, another great transformation has happened is even 10 years ago, if you've gone out and you tell somebody, hey, I'm not having food today because I'm on a diet, typical attitude, whether it's peers or anybody says, hey, come on, it's one day, don't make a fuss, or some such thing like that, right? But things have changed so much today that if you go out and say, hey, I'm not eating this, I'm on a gluten-free diet, I'm on a keto diet, I'm on intermittent fasting, people immediately understand. They don't say a single word about it, and it's accepted now. You can go out on sales meetings and say, I don't drink, and it's accepted. So the world has changed. It's very supportive to people leading a healthy lifestyle, and we should take advantage of this and use it to the maximum.
Well, thank you so much, Vinay. That was very useful. I'm going to ask you another personal question. You don't have to answer if you feel this is something you don't wish to respond to it. Where you put your money for investment? Is stock your preferred option, or anything else? How do you plan your investment every month?
Well, the easiest is indirectly through stocks. So depending on your appetite, get into mutual funds. Those are the easiest ways of doing it. One overlooked piece is called Nifty Bees, which is essentially like a mutual fund, but which only invests in Nifty stocks. So if you're very confident or bullish about the Indian stock market and Indian stocks, which I am, honestly, I would say you're going to see phenomenal returns in the next 10 years. I would literally say double of all the indexes which we are, double of the value which they are today. You can just put it in Nifty Bees. But I would strongly recommend, this is not an investment, but I would say have insurance, both in terms of health and life. Ensure you keep money aside for it. Um, buy gold only and only if it is an absolute requirement, or buy digital gold. And again, what's the price? It's like today we're talking of it when it's kind of at an all-time high. So don't really, not probably the best time to look into it. You can buy equities, but you should also educate yourself and be trained into doing it at the right time before you want to do it yourself. And if you don't have enough time, then just go in for an aggressive mutual fund. That would probably make more sense. You can have some money in the bank, but honestly speaking, I do not recommend keeping money in your savings bank account. You can easily put money into a term deposit, which is definitely going to fetch you more money and which will be easily accessible to you in this digital age in an emergency. And break your deposit and get the funds credited very fast. If you have spare funds, complete spare funds, it's only then I would recommend buying property. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. The entire Indian market, property prices are overheated. You will not see capital appreciation for a long time now. Land is probably okay, but again, I really, there is an obsession about owning a house and saying I have a place to stay. I just want to tell everybody out there is more than enough flats. You will always find something for rent until or unless you really have that money with you, or at least have a majority of that money. Just do the math. It really doesn't make sense taking a home loan or a housing loan. So this is what I would say: spread out your investments. But personally, if you ask me, putting money into the stock market directly or indirectly, and letting it be there for the next 5-10 years, is really going to pay off in a large.
So for someone who's joining the IT industry or any other organization, like in India or anywhere, so the first thing is, once he starts his career, he has to start investment, right? I mean, investing in stocks and mutual funds or in other form of investment. Am I correct, Vinay?
Yes, you must. The earlier you start with even small amounts, let's say you start with 1,000 rupees a month in your early 20s, and then slowly keep increasing it. Just go on to Google and just type power of compounding. You'll get so many articles. You'll understand how you can hit your financial goals by your early 40s or mid 40s if you start investing in your 20s. Literally, this is the key to early retirement. Compounding. There's no other word for it. Just compounding.
And Vinay, do you have any set morning or night routine, which you follow every day, or?
So I do go for a walk every day, and that's my me time.
What time you wake up? What's your standard?
I'm up by about 6:30. I'm out for my walk by around 7 to 8. Sometimes a little earlier. Just varies a little bit, not more than 10-15 minute variance. I would take that time to just reflect as I'm walking. I walk on a set path, so I know that very well, and I allow my mind to process a few things from the previous day and think and plan for the same day. I am very lucky that my wife is a yoga instructor, so I have somebody at home to help me. And in between her busy schedule, I ask her to give me some guidance, and wherever possible, I do some chair or desk yoga. And if I can do more stretches towards the evening, I get into doing it. So this is something I picked up from when the pandemic started, because I wasn't going to work and I felt I wasn't moving at all. And literally, I don't think I've missed more than, say, 10 days in a year for the last 3 years. So anything you do consistently is going to give you results.
Well, I was coming to that next, about your wife. She's a renowned yoga trainer. I mean, can you share more detail about it? I've seen her videos in social media, like some of the training she does and the kind of feedback or testimonial she has received. Can you Can you give us some insight about her yoga classes as well as what she does? She's also a business
Yeah,
analyst,
so
right? I mean, she's also a business analyst. Correct me if I'm wrong.
she also started that way. You're right. She started out as a business analyst. Now she's a project manager. And apart from professionally working as a project manager and a business analyst in the past, which is her kind of day job, her passion has always been yoga. And I think eventually that's what it will become, a full time thing. But for now, um, thanks to COVID and thanks to people accepting online classes, she runs an online batch 3 times a week in the morning and all 5 days in the evening. She's got a multiple different types of students who are there. You have evening being focused on women and kids, and morning being open to any and everybody. She's a lifelong learner. Apart from doing her teacher's training 20 years ago, she's kept studying throughout the years, and even recently just finished yoga therapy and another course, which will basically correlate between every asana and what benefit it brings into a more scientific and easy way for people to understand. So she keeps doing that more often, and um, yeah, so that's pretty much her passion, and that's what she does. I know she's helped a lot of people. I've seen them actually, people coming home and even thanking her, saying that, I didn't think XYZ is possible till I went to your class. So again, it's just people coming in, practicing consistently, pushing yourself, understanding the innate difference between pain and strain. It's good to strain. It may not be very good when you have pain all the time. Sometimes that could be a wrong technique or posture. So you need a good teacher for that. Anywhere, whether it's gym or yoga, or whatever you're doing. So all of this. And yeah, pretty much like as you mentioned and as I mentioned, I'm great that I have such a hands-on and renowned teacher to guide me whenever I need to do so.
Well, fantastic, Vinay. We would love to talk to your wife about it, more in details in the future. Once again, thank you so much.
Absolutely. I'll give you her Instagram link. You can.
Well, of course, we'll do that. Once again, thanks for your time, Vinay. I appreciate the nice gesture. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely, Suresh. It was my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to have this freewheeling chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today on Onsite and Offshore Podcast. We hope you found our conversation insightful and engaging. And remember, if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. That way, you'll never miss an episode and will always be up to date with the latest insight and discussion. We love hearing from our listeners, so please don't hesitate to reach out with any question, comments, or feedback. You can find us on social media or shoot us an email. Goodbye and take care.